Hello, we're continuing our study for WJEC Eduqas A-Level Religious Studies Judaism Theme 2. Today we're going to look at the topic of the Messiah within Judaism. Now, first of all, who is the Messiah within Judaism? The word Messiah, or in Hebrew Mashiach, means literally anointed one. And this refers to the ritual of anointing a king with holy oil, which consecrates him to the Lord. So the Messiah is the anointed one. Right, so obviously he is therefore a type of a king who is anointed by God. Jews believe that this anointed one will be a future leader or king of the Jewish people, ushering in a new age of freedom, justice and peace under God's rule. So he is obviously going to play a very important role, you could say, at the end of time, by creating worldwide peace and harmony. Isaiah chapter 2 talks about a time when the Jews are free from subjugation and they will return to the Holy Land of Israel, where the Jerusalem temple will be rebuilt. So another thing that Messiah will do, besides from establishing peace on earth, is to rebuild the Jerusalem temple and ensure that every member of the chosen race, the Jewish people, will be brought back to their Holy Land, which is in Israel. At that time, God's presence will be felt, of course, by the Jews, but also by Gentiles too, as God's rule and righteousness are established across all the earth. So the centre of this rule, where the Messiah will reign, is in Jerusalem, it is in Israel, but at the same time, the Gentiles and those living outside of Israel will live under the kingdom of God too. So it's not just restricted to Israel and the Jews. And the human leader that obviously is going to lead this new society, this new kingdom, as well as judge and safeguard it, will be the Messiah, according to Isaiah chapter 11. The prophet Jeremiah also mentions that the Messiah will be a political leader from the line of King David, because the Bible does talk about him being descended from King David. So there's another sign there that he is has a royal heritage, and he is himself a king. He'll also be well versed in Jewish law, so he'll know the mitzvot, and which will enable him to make righteous judgment. So he'll come and he'll ensure that, basically the world is going in the way that we'd hope it would go. Okay, there will not be any crime or any issues. Everything will be perfect and it will be very peaceful, because the Messiah will be this leader, this king who establishes God's rule and his covenant on earth in a tangible sense. Right, so obviously nowadays Jews try their best to keep it individually or in their communities, but when the Messiah comes, the whole world will be under God's dominion and under his rule through his Messiah. The philosopher Maimonides also claimed that he who doesn't believe in the Messiah denies the Torah. And the Talmud adds that the world was created only for the Messiah. So we can see that the Messiah is arguably like the most important human being within Judaism, right? So obviously we've got Abraham, who is the patriarch, the founder of Judaism, and then Moses, who's the most important prophet according to Maimonides' 13 principles, because he's the one who receives the law on Sinai and who establishes a covenant with God, which still lasts today for Jews. But it's the Messiah who is the ultimate ruler. It's the Messiah who, according to the Talmud, again, the world was created only for him. And it's so plain in the Torah, Maimonides would argue, because there are lots of passages, lots of prophecies, especially in the book of the prophet Isaiah, all about this Messiah. And also, you could say, is this a belief, the belief of the Messiah, is this a core belief within Judaism? That's a question we could ask. Now, of course, we can look at different interpretations about that later on, but for many, it is an essential belief, because the Messiah is the sort of God's representative on earth. And so Nicholas Delange calls the belief or the doctrine of the Messiah one of the most distinctive ideas of classical Judaism. Right? You don't really have this idea of a Messiah who's going to be God's representative, God's saviour, who's going to come down and he's going to rule. This is quite a unique idea of Judaism. And for many, especially Orthodox Jews, it's one of the most essential beliefs also. Okay, what is a Messianic age? So we've talked about the Messiah who's a person, but according to some, the world after the Messiah actually arrives is referred to as the Messianic age. So Jews are in agreement that there is some sort of Messianic age, but there is debate as to what it will be like specifically. For example, the Babylonian Talmud states that the coming of the Messiah will not be a supernatural event. but it will not mean, or it will mean rather, that Israel is no longer subjugated. So the Messiah will come. He won't be, just come out of the clouds in a spectacular performance, and it will be, sort of a miraculous event. Rather, he'll be born as a regular sort of Jewish man, but he will be a descendant of King David, and he will ensure that peace and harmony is brought enough. So it's not going to be sort of a miraculous birth or a miraculous arrival. It's going to be a normal person, but that person has been destined to be the Messiah. Maimonides didn't think that the Messianic age would change nature either, but it would involve the rebuilding of a temple and the gathering of the Jews together as one nation under the rule of King Messiah. We've already looked at those ideas about how it's not going to sort of destroy the world when the Messiah comes, right? Or it's not going to create some like cosmic disturbances, but it's going to ensure that now peace is going to arrive, right? There's no going to be any wars or any fighting or any death. There's going to be the temple again. There's going to be the Jews as one united nation in the Holy Land, and the world will know God's love and his peace. Maimonides also thought that the purpose of the Messianic age was not to be superior to other nations, but to study the Torah and prepare for the afterlife. So the Messianic age will be an earthly, natural thing towards the end of time, but in that time, because as time is sort of coming to its end, that's the time when the Torah and the mitzvot need to be studied the most so that people can prepare for the afterlife and where they're going to spend their eternal abode, with God or without him. Orthodox Jews also believe that Elijah will precede the Messiah's coming, who will set up a new world order founded upon the mitzvot following a period of chaos. So there may be a period of sort of war and fighting and disaster just before the Messiah arrives, but then when he comes, now people will follow the mitzvah and they will obey God more than they ever have before. At the same time, Jerusalem will be rebuilt, and the world will eventually be judged at the end of the Messianic age, before the resurrection of the dead and the final judgment as well. So there are beliefs there, to do with the afterlife too. It's generally believed that the Messiah will come based on the conduct of the world, either when people are so wicked that he comes to judge them, so he just has to come to save us from our wickedness, or, on the other hand, when we are so righteous that we deserve his coming, right? That actually this is the perfect time for him to come. He's going to say, okay, you've done great. I'm here now as your servant. I'm here to reward you for your good deeds. So is he going to come when we're really evil or when we're really good? That's another debate associated with the Messianic age and the Messiah. Now, Reformed Jews also believe in the Messianic era, but not in the restoration of the Jewish state of Israel, since they reject the idea that the Jews are in exile from their homeland. Okay, so this is taught in things like the Pittsburgh Platform, which we'll look at in a future video. But they don't believe that the Messianic age will mean that everyone's going to go back to Israel, or the Jews are at least, and the temple will be rebuilt. That's not their idea of a Messianic age. Instead, they think that what's happened is the Jews as people have been purposefully dispersed across the world in order to spread monotheism and morality by being an example to others. So they don't think the fact that many Jews, if not actually most Jews, are not in the land of Israel, they don't think that's a bad thing. Then they actually know that's purposeful so that they can then spread the religion of Judaism, spread the worship of the one true God to other nations, right? And so they're not hoping to return to Israel, and that's actually why they oppose, or a lot of Reformed Jews at least, oppose the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, because they don't think that actually the Jews should be going back to Israel. They think they have a mission outside of the land of Israel to preach to the nations, all right? Now, what do Jews believe about death, judgment, and resurrection? So these, of course, are topics that are intimately linked with the Messiah and the Messianic age, because it's all to do with the end times, which is referred to in theology as eschatology. Right? Eschatology is the field of theology looking at the end times and what's going to happen at the end of the world. Now, for many people, or for many Jews at least, death is not significant, as it's just another part of God's plan. This is reflected if you look at Jewish funeral practices, which are more about helping mourners than the deceased. Okay. However, the Nevi'im, which is the prophets in the Tanakh, refers to the resurrection of the dead twice, once in Isaiah 26 and the other time in Daniel 12. Scholars think these passages were influenced by Persian thought because they were probably written later on, according to some. Okay, so actually the fact that there isn't much mention of the resurrection of the dead probably means that it's an accretion that was added later on as a result of external influence. Now, the book of Daniel doesn't use the term Messiah, but uses the term the Son of Man instead. If you read Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14, it talks about the Ancient of Days, who is God, or God the Father, and then the Son of Man, who is coming before God, and and serving him. But also he himself is going to have a kingdom and dominion and power. And so for Christians, they would interpret the Son of Man as being Jesus, as being the Messiah. But for Jews who do not believe in Jesus, the Son of Man here is just the Messiah, whoever that will eventually be. Okay? And when he comes, at the end of time, God's judgment will then ensue. So the ultimate goal of history is the arrival of God's kingdom, which is heralded by the Messiah. Okay, so the Messiah plays an important role in the arrival of God's kingdom and the eventual judgment at the end of time. Daniel also writes that there will be a day of judgment in which the dead are resurrected and individually judged by God. So everyone will eventually be judged. So you're going to think, okay, well, if we're going to be judged, what's going to happen after that? Well, in the resurrection of the dead is mentioned in Daniel 12:2, and is the last of Maimonides' 13 principles of faith, which means that Orthodox Jews are obliged to believe it. Okay, so Orthodox Jews do believe that the dead will eventually be resurrected. They refer to it in daily prayers and also the funeral Kaddish prayer. And Jews are not allowed, or Orthodox Jews at least, are not allowed to cremate their deceased individuals, or the deceased family members, I should say, because they believe that, the body is eventually going to be resurrected, and so you shouldn't destroy the body, you need to keep it intact for that time in the future. However, Maimonides believed that this was actually a spiritual resurrection, okay? Although the Babylonian Talmud teaches that it's a physical resurrection. Okay, so again, as we said, the Orthodox Jews condemn cremation. So there is debate as to what this resurrection actually is, right? Spiritual or physical, and how it's going to pan out. The Midrash argues that the humble will be raised first, while others believe that those buried in Israel will rise first. So there are a lot of controversies and debates and disagreements concerning the nature of the resurrection, the nature of judgment as well. It's not just a one-size-fits-all belief for Jews, okay? As we'll see a lot of times in this course, there's a diversity of views within Judaism, and this is one doctrine that has a lot of that diversity of views. On the other hand, Reformed Jews do not even believe in the resurrection of the body, right? And they've actually removed references to the resurrection and judgment from their prayer books and from their documents. Instead, they claim that the soul is immortal. So maybe the soul is going to live on in some sort of paradise, but we're not going to be resurrected bodily. Some Jews also believe that we're going to only live on in the memories of others, and actually that after death happens, we ourselves don't go on anymore, but it's the impact that we leave. So that, again, there's sort of a wide range of beliefs concerning judgment in the afterlife in Judaism. Okay, but what about Orthodox Jews? Let's go a bit deeper into what they think about the afterlife. Okay, now the concept of Olam Haba, which means the world to come in Hebrew, is basically the term that is used to refer to the afterlife in general. So from now on, we'll refer to the afterlife as Olam Haba. And for Orthodox Jews, this implies that death is not the end of human existence, because it's the world to come. There's actually something after this life. Now, the Torah rarely talks about the Olam Haba. So again, as we've seen, there isn't unanimity amongst Jews as to what happens after death, apart from the fact that all Jews agree we should live now and forever in the way God intends. So even if they have different views about what's going to happen afterwards, what's important is following the mitzvah and doing what God commands. The Mishnah states that we ought not to serve God to gain a reward in the afterlife, but out of love for him and truth. So Jews don't obey the mitzvah and do these things so that they can go to heaven and avoid hell, right? Or at least that isn't what they should be doing. They do it because they love him, because they love God and they want to actually obey him, right? Moreover, Nicholas Delange argues that the concept of rewards and punishments in the afterlife was a post-biblical idea originating from Greek philosophy. So this idea that we often have of heaven and hell, right? Heaven for those who are being rewarded for their good deeds and hell for those who are being punished for their bad deeds is, according to Delange, a post-biblical idea from Greek philosophy. So therefore it's not actually a biblical Jewish belief, it's a later development. Okay, so this isn't really a classical Jewish belief that there's a heaven and a hell per se. But the Talmud does mention the repose of the souls of the righteous in the Garden of Eden, or Gan Eden, which is further expressed in the El Male Rachamim, which is a funeral prayer. Okay, so there's a couple of, that's a place where they actually still say this idea that actually the righteous will go to a place called Gan Eden. The souls of the wicked go to Gehinnom, which is basically like hell, right, where they are tormented. So there is, although, Nicholas Delange is going to say actually the idea of reward and punishment after life is a post-biblical idea, well, there is also a traditional belief that Jews, righteous people, will go to the Garden of Eden, and the unrighteous will go to Gehenna. So there is still a sort of vague concept of heaven and hell, although it's not identical to our modern idea that we have of it, right? And again, as we've already mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the afterlife within Jewish circles. So even if somebody's going to believe this, there's not much of an emphasis on it, and there is a lot of disagreement as to how it will specifically be. Some think that God will reward the good and punish the evil in the judgment, and our immortal souls will either go to heaven or hell. Again, we've already mentioned the fact that there's a bodily resurrection, but all stress the importance of living a good life here and now rather than focusing on an afterlife, which we have no idea about. So there is a lot of sort of a lack of surety as to what's going to happen. But what we are sure about, what we do know, is that we have to follow God and we have to do his commandments on this side of death. So whatever is going to happen after death, Jews are confident that they have to just follow God and just basically hope for the best. Okay, and you're going to have someone going to say it's heaven or hell, someone's going to say it's a physical or a spiritual resurrection, someone's going to say, we just have our soul that goes somewhere. There's a lot of views. Okay, we need to be aware of the different ones. And finally, what do Reformed Jews believe about the afterlife? Paragraph 7 of the Pittsburgh Platform states, Reformed Judaism rejects the idea of bodily resurrection, but accepts the view that the soul is immortal and that the spirit is divine. So no bodily resurrection. Your body's not going to come back at the end of time, but you do have an immortal soul, which will therefore live on. But how's it going to live on when we die? So, first of all, it's important to remember that references to the physical resurrection have been removed from prayer books, or they've been reinterpreted as an allusion to the immortality of the soul. Okay, so again, Reformed Jews are going to focus on a spiritual rather than a physical afterlife. The idea of the immortality of the soul, which is what they do accept, stems from the doctrine of being made in the image of God. We looked at that in the last video about humanity, okay, which is found in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, right? We're made in the image or b'tselem of God. And that is the divine element within us, which makes us immortal like God. So that means that when we die, our soul is going to live on, okay? This also entails the responsibility of living how God intends in order to serve as an example for others and make the world a better place. So because if we have an immortal soul and if we are God's servants, if we are his stewards, and we reflect his character to a certain extent, then we're going to want to care for his creation and live responsibly so that others may also come and worship and adore God just as Jews do, right? So for Reformed Jews, obsessing over the details of the afterlife is futile, as only God knows about the Olam Haba, and we should instead aim on living the best possible life we can know. And a lot of Orthodox Jews are going to believe in this as well, that it's more important to focus on the here and now rather than what's going to happen after death. But as we've seen, there's a lot of different beliefs about the Messiah, the Messianic age, the resurrection, the afterlife, and what's specifically going to happen. So make sure that you understand the diversity of views associated with that. That's everything for today, though. Thank you.